The Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes is a prequel to the Hunger Games movies. It is directed by Francis Lawrence, who directed the last 3 Hunger Games movies. And like I said, it is a prequel. It takes place decades after the events of the original film, and we follow Snow before he is president of Panem, and we get to see the beginnings of the Hunger Games. Well, not necessarily the beginnings of the Hunger Games himself, but the beginnings of the Hunger Games becoming marketable to the people watching in Panem. And we get to see little inklings of how Snow became the villain that he is in the Hunger Games movies. He is assigned to be the mentor to Lucy Gray, who is the tribute for District 12, and he helps and teaches her how to survive the games. Now, last year, I rewatched all the Hunger Games movies for the 10th anniversary of that first film. But long story short, I liked the first one, loved the second one. The third and fourth one, which is the third book split in 2, it was a little uneven. I do appreciate them years later after they came out, but at the same time, that third book, everybody would agree, should not have been split into 2. Now, I should also state that I have not read any of the books, nor have I read the actual book for this Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. So I kind of went into this a little cold. But how did I feel about this movie? Well, I liked it, but didn't love it. And as YouTube movie critic Dan Merle said about this movie, it's too long and yet short on story. Now, this movie is split into 3 parts, and I felt the first 2 parts were entertaining and the strongest part of the movie, but that third part is where it slows down and it is not as compelling as the first 2 parts. I did like watching the setup of the Hunger Games being marketable, because when you see the Hunger Games at first, it is roughed and effed up. It is not like the games that we saw in the movies with Jennifer Lawrence, where they get them all dolled up and nice and make them look more marketable and they're actually training. Here it's just like, nah, get your ass out there and start fighting. Ain't no prep. It's less sophisticated than we saw in the Jennifer Lawrence movies. And that's one of the things I like about this movie, because you can argue the original Hunger Games movies, it was more about the psychological aspect of it, what that does to a person, especially with post-traumatic stress, and how the people have had enough for dealing with this for so many years that they start rebelling and they actually get the spark going. But here you see more of the genesis of the games happening and how that has an effect on everybody and how everybody feels about it and how unfair it is. And they really put the emphasis on how unfair the games are, because let's be real, putting a bunch of children in an arena where they have to fight to the death, that is fucked up. And I felt this movie illustrated that on how wrong this is on so many levels, more than the other movies. And by the time we get to the games in the other movies, you see how everyone is just complacent. And I felt that's where those first 2 acts shine the most. But the third act is more so about Snow and how he became the person that he is in the original movie. And I just feel like they really didn't do much with that, or they didn't put enough emphasis on it. It just felt like by the time we got to that third movie, it's just rushing to the end, and it's like, all right, have him go through this, and then by the end, he's just evil or starting to be evil. Now, Tom plays Snow in this movie, and as a young Snow, I thought he was fine. He was definitely believable as a younger version of this character. Rachel Zegler plays Lucy Gray, and I thought she was fine in the role at best. She definitely does a lot of singing in this movie, which, hey, as an actress, is a strong point for her. We all know she's a great singer. We saw that in West Side Story. And the film does do a good job at illustrating how rough her character has, because that's all she knows and how she's just thrown into this game and has to fend for herself. Viola Davis, she is on a whole other level from everybody else in this movie, but hey, that's the type of actress she is. Like, she will give 110% no matter how good or bad the script is. And every now and then she was just unhinged but funny, and she had a couple of laughs that had me holler. Peter Dinklage plays one of the original game makers of the Hunger Games, and he's just here just to taunt Snow, and because he used to work with Snow's father in these games. But Peter Dinklage, he is great in anything you put him in. Let's just be real. Hunter Schafer from Euphoria, she plays Tigress in this movie, and I was curious to see if they would do anything with this character, because her character, I remember she was introduced in Mockingjay Part 2, and at that point, I'm just like, why are we introducing characters at the 11th hour of this franchise? And they brought her here, and we get a little bit more context as to who she is, but we still don't know how she got to the point where she is in Mockingjay Part 2. In the end, this movie I felt just would have been a lot better if it was a series, maybe a mini-series, just to flesh the story out just a little bit more, not only for the Hunger Games himself, but particularly for Snow himself, so that we can flesh his story out, so that we can have a little bit more time, so that we can see his gradual change from the person he is at the beginning of the movie to how we see him at the end of the movie, and by proxy, who he is in those original movies. Because aside from the beginning of the Hunger Games, I thought Snow was the selling point of this movie, and we get to see how it becomes just pure evil. Aside from that, the performances were good. The best parts were, in doubt, the first parts of the movie. But everything with Snow was the least interesting part of this movie. Still, I enjoyed this movie for what it was, and I'm going to give The Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds, and Snakes the thumbs up emoji.